The autumn wind swept across the endless prairie grass, carrying with it the scent of coming winter and something else. Something that made the horses nervous and the dogs howl in the distance. In the small settlement of Millbrook, Kansas Territory, folks had learned to trust their instincts about such things. The frontier had a way of teaching hard lessons to those who ignored the warnings that nature provided. It was on such a day that the four brothers first appeared. They came walking down the dusty main road just as the sun reached its highest point. 4 men, identical in every way that mattered, same height, same build, same careful gait. Their dark suits were immaculate despite the long journey. They must have taken to reach this remote place. Their beards were perfectly groomed, their hair combed with mathematical precision. Each wore a black bow tie that caught the light in exactly the same way. The strangest thing, though the townsfolk would not speak of it for months to come, was how they moved. Not quite in step, but not quite out of step either. Like a shadow that had learned to walk slightly behind its owner. Or perhaps ahead of it. Old Martha Henley, who ran the general store, was the first to notice their eyes. All 4 pairs were the same pale blue, but they did not blink at the same time. Instead, they blinked in sequence, left to right, then right to left, over and over again, like a strange living clockwork. "We are looking for land," the first brother said when Martha finally found her voice to ask what they needed. His voice was pleasant enough, cultured even, but it seemed to come from someplace far away. "Good farmland," added the second brother, without pause. "For a church," said the third. "And other purposes," finished the fourth. They purchased supplies. With coins that Martha later described as too new and too old at the same time. Silver dollars that gleamed like fresh metal but bore dates from decades past. When she tried to examine them more closely after the brothers left, she found that the numbers seemed to shift and blur before her eyes. The brothers chose a plot of land 3 miles north of town, near the old Chisholm Trail. It was good land, rich and black, though it had an odd reputation. The previous owner, a farmer named Jacob Weiss, had abandoned it suddenly the year before. He claimed the earth spoke to him during the night hours. Local folks had laughed at old Jacob's stories, but they stopped laughing when his livestock began dying for no apparent reason. The brothers paid cash for the land, once again using those strange, impossible coins. They moved onto the property that very afternoon, bringing with them a single wagon loaded with tools and lumber. No furniture, no personal belongings, just the materials needed to build. What they built was unlike anything the territory had seen. Before the structure rose from the prairie like a vision from a fever dream. It was a church, as they had claimed, but it was also something else entirely. The walls were built from local timber, but they curved and twisted in ways that made the eye water to follow them. The roof peaked and dipped in impossible angles, creating shadows that seemed to move independently of the sun. The strangest feature was the bell tower. It rose high above the main structure, perfectly straight and geometrically sound, yet it appeared to lean in different directions depending on where you stood to observe it. The bell itself was cast from metal that no one in the territory could identify. It was not bronze or iron or steel, but something that shifted between silver and black as the light changed. The brothers worked on their church, every day from dawn until dusk. They worked in perfect coordination, never speaking, never needing to communicate their intentions. When one reached for a hammer, another would already be extending the nails. When one measured a board, another would be preparing the saw. It was like watching a single person with 4 bodies or 4 people sharing a single mind. The townspeople tried to be neighborly at first. They brought food and offered help with the construction. But the brothers accepted no assistance and showed no interest in the offerings. They would simply stand there, all 4 of them, blinking in that unsettling sequence. Until the visitors became uncomfortable and left as the weeks passed, strange things began to happen in Millbrook. The first incident occurred when young Timothy Fletcher went missing for 3 days. He was found wandering the prairie, speaking in a language that no one recognized. When asked where he had been, he could only say that he had been learning the songs. He would hum these songs constantly, melodies that seemed to burrow into The listeners mined and echoed there for hours afterward. Then came the night, when every dog in town began howling at precisely midnight. They howled for exactly 1 hour, then fell silent all at once. This happened every night for a week, until the dogs simply stopped making any sounds at all. They would open their mouths as if to bark, but no sound would emerge. The crops began to behave strangely as well. Corn stalks grew in perfect spirals, wheat formed geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, and the apple trees bore fruit that was beautiful to behold but turned to ash the moment it was touched. Dr. Edmund Blackwood, the town's physician and a man of science, decided to investigate. He was a rational man who had studied at Harvard and had little patience for frontier superstitions. On a cold October evening, he rode out to the brothers' property. Determined to find logical explanations for the unusual occurrences, he found the four brothers standing in their completed church, though standing was perhaps not the correct word. They were positioned at the four corners of the building, arms outstretched, eyes closed, swaying slightly as if moved by a wind that did not exist. The strange bell in the tower was ringing, though no one was pulling the rope, and the sound it made was not quite like any bell Dr. Blackwood had ever heard when he called out to them. All four brothers opened their eyes simultaneously and turned to look at him. Their pale blue eyes reflected the lamplight like mirrors, and for a moment Dr. Blackwood swore he could see something moving behind their pupils, something that was not quite human. "We are conducting services," the first brother said. "For our congregation," added the second. "They are very faithful," said the third. "Though they cannot speak," finished the fourth. It was then that Dr. Blackwood noticed the shadows. The church was filled with them, tall and thin and moving independently of any light source. They swayed and shifted like wheat in a breeze, but when he tried to focus on any individual shadow, it would disappear entirely. Dr. Blackwood was a man of science, but he was also a man of sense. He backed away from the church, mounted his horse, and rode hard for town. He never spoke publicly about what he had seen, but he began making preparations to leave Millbrook. Within a month, he had sold his practice and departed for San Francisco. The brothers continued their services every night. The bell would ring at midnight, calling to a congregation that existed only in shadows. The townspeople learned to stay indoors during these hours, though they could not explain why. Those who were brave enough to venture near the church reported seeing lights moving within, lights that cast no shadows and illuminated nothing. Winter came early that year, and with it came the investigators. 3 men arrived from the east, claiming to represent various scientific institutions. They carried cameras and measuring devices and notebooks filled with calculations. They were polite but determined, and they asked many questions about the brothers and their unusual church. The investigators stayed for exactly 1 week. On the morning of their departure, they loaded their equipment into their wagon with shaking hands. Their leader, a professor from Yale whose name was never recorded, gathered the townspeople together for a final statement. "We have concluded our investigation," he announced, his voice strained. "We have found nothing that warrants further study. The phenomena reported here are the result of frontier isolation and collective imagination. We recommend that no further scientific attention be directed toward this location." The professor's hands trembled as he spoke, and several townspeople noticed that his hair had turned completely white during his week-long stay. The other investigators would not meet anyone's eyes and spoke only to urge a hasty departure. Their wagon had barely disappeared over the horizon when the first of the vanishings began. People started disappearing from Millbrook one by one. They would be there one day and gone the next, with no sign of struggle or departure. Their belongings remained untouched, their beds unslept in, their daily routines simply interrupted. Those who remained found themselves drawn to the church despite their fear. They would wake in the middle of the night with an overwhelming urge to walk toward the strange building. Some resisted, barricading themselves in their homes. Others were found the next morning, standing in the prairie grass, staring at the church with vacant eyes. By spring, Millbrook was a ghost town. The Few remaining residents packed their belongings and fled, abandoning their homes and businesses. They spread across the frontier, carrying whispered warnings about the four brothers and their impossible church. The government land office sealed the records of the property sale. The territorial authorities classified all reports about the incidents as unsubstantiated frontier mythology. The church was declared unsafe and ordered demolished, though the